Hey guys, welcome to Darth Tyrax Presents. I'm Darth Tyrax. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of my favorite miniature war games, Battletech Alpha Srike. Now, anybody out there who's played war games will probably have heard of what I call classic Battletech or just Battletech, Game of Armored Combat, Total Warfare. The original Battletech was actually a more board game like, in that while there were miniatures, you didn't need miniatures. They had cardboard and just images on them, and you played on hex maps, so it was very much a board game like thing rather than a miniatures war game per se. Now, Battletech has been around since mid to late 80s. I got into it, I think it was right around the second to third edition transition, where second edition came with hex maps and cardboard standees with pictures of the mechs on the cardboard and these little plastic things so they could stand up. Came with a couple of maps, so you had your hexes, map expansions, so on and so forth. And then third edition actually gave you printed, well, not printed, but manufactured plastic miniatures. Not posable, they were a static pose, but you got several miniatures and it allowed you to play plenty of games in third edition. Now, eventually, this game was originally done by FASA, and you could buy metal miniatures, both lead and I guess the material that replaced it was Relidium or something along those lines. And they were made by Ralpartha. And now the game itself is a fun game. I still like playing the original game. It's just very crunchy, and it can be very slow depending on what you're playing and how you're playing and how well you know the rules, because it's a fairly detailed combat system in how damage is done, movement, and other things that are involved. Now, Battletech itself, the setting, is set in the 31st century. Mankind has gone out and colonized the stars, and as such eventually had a relatively peaceful time for a while until there was a lot of infighting, and then a mass exodus of the military and their families left, resulting in what was known as succession wars through the later like 28th, 29th, and 30th centuries into the 31st century, where most of us, I think, still play mid 31st century era games, but there's various eras. There's the Succession War era. Then my favorite is the Clan Invasion era. That's the era I normally play in. And then there's Jihad and some later era stuff right up to what was called Dark Age, which is during the 32nd century. Earth, of course, is fairly central in a lot of things going on, because basically the faction that claims Earth claims domain over all, so to speak. And then there's a number of factions. You have different houses. You have the people who left coming back at being known as the clans, and then there's mercenaries and periphery folk, and there's a lot going on in the setting. It's actually a really good setting that can have both a wartime feel, but can also deal with political intrigue if you get into the role-playing game and some of the other aspects of the setting and games that are available. But as I said, this particular episode, we're focusing on Alpha Srike. Alpha Srike is a more streamlined version of the tabletop game. It is also by default meant to be a 3D terrain tabletop game, much like your Warhammer 40Ks and your Star Wars Legion, and things like Team Yankee and Flames of War, and where you play on basically your dinner room table with buildings and roads and trees and hills, and it's meant to be by default, as I said, with 3D terrain for the table, whereas the classic version uses a hex map with terrain printed on it, but it's flat and everything's printed like if there's different elevations. Now, you can play Alpha Srike with the hex maps. There are a few conversion notes to allow you to do so, and it can play okay that way. I like the look of a good 3D table, um, but it's yeah, you can play it both ways. The maps allow you to play on a smaller surface because generally speaking, Alpha Strike should probably be played basically on your dinner table. So, say a 4 foot by 4 foot to a 6 foot by 4 foot table is usually plenty. Because with mechs, yeah, you're going to get into generally the closer you get, the easier it is to hit. So you want to get to a closer range, and usually combat happens anywhere from 20 to 30 inches away from each other, so 2 to 3 feet. Getting too close, yeah, well, that's a threat. But the game itself still holds many aspects, we'll say, or at least variations on the classic game, and that's why I really like it. It's faster. You can play much bigger battles where the original, once you got to 3 or 4 battle mechs on a side, the game really took a long time. Where this one, it's designed to run 10 to 12 per side, and a game like that, I think I remember correctly. I Facebook lived a game with a friend of mine, and I think we were done in about 90 minutes, and that was a 12-on-12 match. Um, but things like how you do damage, critical hits, movement, all took were taken away from the classic version and just streamlined some to speed things up. Now there's other rules and things as well that kind of transfer over to a degree, but by and large, you still get the feel of classic, but in a faster package that you can play bigger battles. And that's the part I like. The 3 or 4 against each other was okay. I like the idea of having 12, 24 battle mechs on a side and facing the same on the other, and just going and trying to outmaneuver. And initiative isn't as big an issue with that many units, because while you can do one thing, yeah, you can mess up this, but the others can kind of flank around. And when you're playing the classic version, initiative really has too much power, the fewer mechs there are. So once you're playing a 12-on-12, which is like a battalion a company on a company, it really gets interesting. So that's why I really like Alpha Strike, and the fact you're playing on a larger table is really nice too. And you can play the larger battles. We've been looking to do a battalion on battalion, which is about 40 on a side, 3 companies and a command unit, and that'd be about 40 mechs a side. We've done 2 companies versus, in the case of clans, 2 binaries. 2 binaries being 20 mechs and 2 companies being 24. That game I think took us about 2.5 hours, but there was also 3 players involved, and one of them hadn't really played Alpha Strike before, so we were kind of teaching as we went as well. But 2 people who know how to play the game could probably do that game in two hours or so if you focus and just play the game. And that's the key with a lot of these miniature war games, is if it takes too long to play, is it worth playing? And gamers like me, I don't have 6 hours to get a game in. I have 3, maybe 4, generally speaking. So you got to take into account table setup, table teardown. That can take upwards to an hour total as well. So if I've got 4 hours, it takes an hour to set up the table and tear down the table. That's 3 hours of playing. So you got to be focused to get your game in. And some games they're just not designed that way, and they generally take 3 hours. A good game of Star Wars Armada, for example, or a good game of Flames of War or Team Yankee could take up to 2 hours, and they're not that extensive a game. And it just takes time. And unfortunately, that's the case with anything else as well. Role-playing games, video games, if you're going to do raids and things in a game like WoW, yeah, you need the time. And a game like Alpha Strike, you could even make it less than the 12. You can still do a 4-on-4, and that game will go really quick. And that might be where using the hex maps is beneficial. So you can set up a couple of maps with 4 mechs aside and go, and still get that feel of playing a pretty good game. Now, Battletech Alpha Strike is also at a fairly small scale. Games like 40K and Star Wars Legion are at like 32 millimeter, 40 millimeter scale. Flames of War and Team Yankee are at 15 millimeter scale. This game is at what is considered to be 5 to 6 millimeter scale, and that's pretty small. So I'll give you an example here. Here are two of the battle mechs. One is a Clan Timberwolf, and the other is an Inner Sphere Awesome. So see those? There we go. The mechs look usually pretty nice. This is a plastic one. This is an older Alpartha one. I painted this one. Someone painted this one. And honestly, they are really nice. Generally speaking, battle mechs, if they were real, stand anywhere from 30 to 50 feet tall. The miniatures run generally between 1.5 to 2 inches tall. And that gives you just how much shrunk down they are. Now, for the tables, simple enough. You get some model trees, like so. They're usually about 2-3 inches tall. You can get 3D printed buildings like this one, and then if you compare the size next to them, that kind of gives you an idea just how big they are. These decorate the table really nicely. There's lots of PDFs that you can print and cut out that give you additional buildings. Like this one is, let's see, this one is a 9-story building, and it's just, if you see here, it's just on cardstock, folded up, taped on the sides, has enough detail on it that on the table it actually looks really nice. I use a lot of these. Drive-Through RPG actually has a ton of these files on there, as does Sarna.net, which is the Battletech wiki. They got all kinds of downloadable content on there. It's great, and it's terrific to get your table set up really fast. But again, so you can see, here's a 9 to 10 story building with a battle mech next to it, and you can see it stands like 4.5 stories tall, which is about 40 to 50 feet. It's easy enough to make terrain for these as well, because this is one I haven't finished yet. It's just a quick little thing I did, some tape and some cardboard, and it's an overpass. So there you can see road can come under here. The road goes up and over. I'll see if I can set this up here. So you see he's standing on there, or behind it, or in front of it. And it's really easy to set your table up. And even setting up the basics of a table, you can get like different colored tablecloth. Essentially, you get a green or a brown, and there's your, like a light brown. There's your not urban, but rural area, and you get some trees, like I said, like these, and that'll get you a forest. You can put just put books under the tablecloth, and that'll create hills for you. Roads are easy enough. You get some black poster board and cut it up, or again, there's PDFs with things on it, and it's easy enough. You just cut out strips that are about 1 inch wide, give or take, or maybe 1.5 inches. There's your roads. You can run them up over the hills and stuff too. Set up a city, get a gray tablecloth. It's really easy to get a decent table for a really affordable cost. Like these, many of these paper ones, I think I'd pay it $1 for the PDF, and I'd get 3 or 4 buildings out of it. But like I said, Sarna.net, a ton of free downloads of buildings and other things. In the case of the Sarna.net, I even got a drop ship, and it's probably about, it's like a foot and a bit long, and a good 4 or 5 inches high. Looks really cool on the table. And then like even there's other aspects too, because there's tanks, or you can get fighters. Like this is actually a Robotech fighter, but it's in the same scale, so you can see how small they are. Again, there's battle mech to show, and it's great in that the things are small. They don't take long to paint. I'm not a great painter, as many found out recently. I hate painting, but like I said, this is one I painted. It's hard to tell with the lighting here, but see, like it's just a base blue, green on the base, as you can see, and then some gray on the guns, red for the cockpit, and they're easy enough to paint up. They're nice enough and detailed enough that if you like painting and you want to take the extra time, they can look really, really good. I've seen some that are painted up fantastically. I just don't have the patience, nor do I want to actually do it. Now, the game itself is actually really easy to learn. All you need is a couple of D6s, or well, I guess probably if you're using some of the optional rules, you need maybe 5 or 6 at most for the most part. But if you play the standard bare bones, let's get at it game, you need 2d6s. 2d6s, and if you want miniatures, by default, you need 10 to 12 of these. They're not hard to find. The base box game, I think, comes with 8, if I remember correct. Well, the base box game for Battletech Classic comes with 8. But you can find them online. You can find them some local stores. I think Meeple Mart in Toronto is really the only store that carries them. So you can go on their website and order stuff from them. They sell them in boxes of 4 or 5 if and when in stock. They can be a little hard to track down. But much like paper terrain, it's actually really easy to create your own paper standees as long as you can get the images online. You print it on a little thing about 1 inch wide, 2 inches tall, you're good to go. And I'm someone who doesn't mind doing that. A lot of people don't like that. I don't mind. I have a representation of my mech. I'm good to go. I can play the game. Let's get at it, you know? I'm more about play rather than aesthetics mostly. So now that's a me personally thing, but you know how it is. But the game itself is really fun. Once you get into the rules, you can start expanding into some of the special rules like pilot abilities or mech perks and detriments. There's a campaign option as well that you can play. The current rule book, because this one, that's the original. The current book is called Alpha Srike Commander's Edition. Now, it basically combined that book with what was called the Alpha Srike Companion, and had a bunch of information for other stuff like campaigns and how to determine a winner by victory points rather than other things like having objectives and such, rather than just beating the crap out of each other. So if you're looking for a book, that book's available in PDF or hard copy as far as I know. And it does give rules right across the board that not just mechs. It gives rules for aerospace. It gives rules for vehicles. It gives rules for battle armor. It gives rules for infantry. So, you know, it gives you, you can have a whole big combined arms thing going on. And it's actually fun when you start getting tanks and things involved, because sometimes tanks, they can still rule the battlefield in this game. I know. I've done it with a certain tank that just, once it hit range, it was just wreaking havoc. But the game is fast. Once you learn the rules, game gets fast. It looks great on the table, especially if you have some nice terrain and stuff setting your table up. Like I've even got a building that stands about 16 inches tall. So it looked great when you put that in the center of the table, surrounded by some smaller buildings and a park and a river, and it really ends up looking great on the table. But the game, yeah, it's just a lot of fun. And, you know, you can customize your mechs. You can have specialty units. You can, it's the whole collectible aspect and hobby aspect can be played out across so many things in this game. It has your sci-fi aspects with giant robots. It has your more traditional aspects with tanks and arrows and fighter jets. You can get infantry, but I think they're really hard to track down. Personally, I actually try to track down Warhammer 40k epic battle armors and such, because that's roughly the same scale. They'll work, and you put them on a base, you can have like 4 little dudes on there, and away you go. But it gives such a great combined warfare aspect that you can play out. And again, it's not just set at a certain size. Now, obviously, you get too big, it's going to take a while, but you could probably get a battalion on battalion game going, and probably take you about 3 hours, maybe 4, depending on how much chit chat's going on, how focused you are, and really how the dice rolls go, right? As in any game, if neither of you can get any luck, it's going to take a while. But overall, the game is great. It gives you a lot of different aspects of the hobby in painting and modeling and possible customization. Again, terrain creation with 3D printing or even by hand. and it lets you access a lot of different outlets for this hobby if you're really into doing all of these things. Like these, I bought these on Wish. I got a whole crap load, and I'm like $30 all in for the trees themselves, the clay, and the brown paint, and my time. And I'm not one to want to do a lot of this stuff, but that wasn't so bad. Like it's pretty simple. So again, Battletech Alpha Srike. It's a great game. If you have any questions, by all means, put them in the comments, or you can find me on Facebook as well. We have the Peterborough, Durham, and Kawartha Battletech players on Facebook group. So if you want to check that out, and I'm going to start trying to post some more new content again, and check it out. It's a great game. We'll see you next time. Cheers.